Have you got a quarter cable dovetail jig? Has it sat in your shop since you bought it and you're just too intimidated by it to use it? Have you looked for guidance on how to use it, but you just can't seem to find what you're needing to get you started? And the user's manual is not so user-friendly. Well, let me end that for you today and get you started making dovetails immediately. In the description below this video, you'll find links to videos that you need in order to make through dovetails, sliding and stop dovetails, and half-blind dovetail joints. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to make box joints on the quarter cable 4216 dovetail jig. We're going to cover setting up the jig and everything that you will need to know in order to successfully make box joints the very first try. So stay right there. Before we get started, let me say this method is not by the user's manual. This is just how I make box joints using this jig, and they come out perfect every time. With the 4216 model, you should have 3 templates, 4 guide bushings, and 4 router bits. Of these templates, there's a template for half-blind dovetails. You can also make dados and sliding and stop dovetails with this template. The other 2 templates are for through dovetails and box joints, one using a 1/2-inch dovetail bit set and the other using a 1/4-inch dovetail bit set. The bits provided with the jig are for your dovetails and pin cuts only. Lay those aside for right now. We will not be using these in this video. You will not be using those to make box joints with. To make box joints, you will need to select one of the 2 through dovetail templates. I'll be using the 1/4-inch template in this video. If you selected the 1/2-inch, that's fine. All the same principles apply. You will also need the appropriate guide bushing for the template that you chose. The guide bushing you will be using is the bushing for the dovetail bit, which is the bushing with the larger hole of whichever template you chose. The pattern bushings, you can set those aside. We will not be needing them in this process. Now, if you chose the 1/2-inch template and guide bushing, you will need a 1/2-inch straight bit. I'm using a 1/4-inch template, so with that, I will be using a 1/4-inch dovetail bushing and a 1/4-inch straight bit. All right, right here's what I'm talking about. If you choose the 1/2-inch template, you will need to get the guide bushing that is for the dovetail bit. It will be the one that is larger. And the reason why is because you can set that in that hole and there's no side-to-side movement. You're not going to want any side-to-side movement. And same thing for the 1/4-inch. You'll want to get the bushing that is for the dovetail bit, which is the larger one. And just like the 1/2-inch, there's no side-to-side movement in that at all, like there is with this one right here, and we don't want that side-to-side movement. That's why you'll use, if you're using a 1/4-inch, you will use the dovetail bushing. If you're using a 1/2-inch, you'll use the 1/2-inch dovetail bushing. And just like when you're making dovetails, this break right here, this stop, go ahead and loosen it up and just shove it all the way over to the left just to get it out of your way. And in the past, I've had, on my other videos, I've had a lot of people to ask how to set this depth stop for your bit. How do you know what to set it at? And how do you set it? Let me show you that. Now the set nut on this is a 3/8 inch. And what you'll do is you'll loosen that up and then you can freely spin this up and down to get that depth, get it set, and then set that back down. Let me show you how to get that distance between here and the top of the template to set your router bit at. Now, what I like to do is just go ahead and set my template on there. And as you can see, I have 2 pieces of sacrificial board on this, and you can spread those out to make this template sit down on here flat. Go ahead and put your template down on it. Make sure that it is all the way down against both of those pieces, and that way you know it's flush with the top of the jig all the way across. You're not going to start out with box joints over here shallow and then get deeper over here because you've put everything on this side, pushed it down, and you've got this template actually bowing down on one side or the other. So put your couple pieces of scrap material on it that is the same thickness as your work material. Push it down and then just tighten your sets up on it. Push this one down and tighten it up. Now we got our template where we want it. And now in order to set this for the depth that you need, when you put your router in there and you plunge that bit down, you want that bit even with the bottom of your work or your sacrificial piece. You want it to come out flush with it or slightly over. And here's how I get that. I will take a piece that I'm actually using. This is the piece we're going to be cutting box joints in just a minute. And I'm going to slide that between the template and that stop. And if that piece is loose, then I'm going to loosen that nut on that and crank it up to this piece so that it's just fitting in there snug. There's no downward motion on it. And then I'll pull that and the template back off of it, hold it and lock that screw, and then check it again. And that tells you the thickness of that piece when you plunge your router base down into it. Now I hope you can tell on camera what you're looking at. Right here's the sacrificial piece, which is the same thickness as my work piece, and this bit is flush. Well, actually it's just slightly protruding past this piece of sacrificial board, which tells me that I'm at my right depth. Also, something else to look for too is before you plunge this down on top of your gauge, and then you come over here and you see that you're still a little bit short, you adjust this, you go back and you're still a little bit short, you go back and adjust this again, you're still a little bit short. Make sure that you loosen this depth gauge, loosen it up, pull it all the way up out of your way, because that's probably what's keeping you from plunging all the way down to that stop and then locking it down. I will also touch on one other thing real quick because I've had a lot of questions on that also. Under this template that goes behind these legs is a brass nut, and when you pull this template off, when you pull it up, if that bracket is rubbing against either one of these, it will have a tendency to move it. And I've had people talk about putting a rubber washer on it or putting a nut behind it to cinch against it to keep that from moving, and that's fine. But if you noticed, if you watched my other video on making through dovetails, and I just happened to think about this, I like to bring when I'm cutting my pins, bring my template forward so my dovetails and pins go together just a little bit tight, and then creeping back. And if I put that nut or washer on it, it's going to make that more aggravating and more difficult to do that. So I have not put that on there, and probably will not for that purpose. There is lines on here that tells you where the box, of course they're kind of faint when your vision is as bad as mine is, but they're wide too. There's not really what you'd call a center to it to line up with the edge of the board. It comes up through here that you're actually working on and your sacrificial board. But if you get it close when you're cutting your pins or when you're cutting these finger joints, box joints, if you get it close, that's all that matters. As long as that template is straight this way and not like this or like this to the jig, you don't want your cut going through in an angle one way or the other. So just get it just as close as you can. It will be fine when you're cutting your dovetails and when you're cutting your box joints. When you cut your pins, if you will move that template towards you, it will tighten those up, and then you can creep up on that perfect fit, which I show all that in that other video. There'll be a link in the description to that. But I just thought I'd touch on that because I have had so many questions about putting a lock nut or a rubber washer to stabilize that brass bushing. And for the way that I do mine, I really don't want to stop that from turning. It's just going to make it more aggravating when I go to do my adjustments. Now we've got our sacrificial boards in there. We put our template on there, push that back, make sure it's down, make sure it's down on both sides. We've already set the depth of our router bit. So now what we've got to do is we'll take our work pieces. And if you notice, I've put a piece of blue tape on each one of these. And one of them, that blue tape, which this is representing the face of the board. This is the face of the board. On one of them, we're going to turn the face toward the jig. And on the other one, we're going to turn the face away from the jig. And then that way when they're cut, your box joints, your finger joints will be opposite of each other and they will slide right in there. Now when you're making dovetails, you will try to split the difference, the distance of this edge to the distance of that pin, and same thing here, to try to get those just as even as possible. And it helps you out a lot during the process of making drawers and things of that nature, using dovetail joints, through dovetail joints, or even half blinds. Making a box joint, now this is not textbook as far as the manual is concerned, but here's how I do mine when I am making box joints. I will slide this over so that the edge of this board is even with that pin, and then lock it down. Then I am going to move this one over, my sacrificial board, move it over to that, and this other one that was helping me line my template up, I'm going to put it just right beside it. Alright, now I've got this side, this edge of this board lined up as well as I can get it with the side of that pin. And that's gonna benefit me when I go to making these box joints. It's gonna leave me a leg on this side. Of course, that one right there is probably going to get cut completely out, but that's fine. On my other piece, there'll be one to go back in each one of those places that's cut out. And now that that is set up, just take your wrench, slide this bracket right here, just go ahead and slide it over against that board and tighten it down. Now that we've got those cut, take that out, and remember on my very first one, I put my outside of my board facing the jig, and you can see right here how much I was off from being flush with that pin, which that's fine. This is just for practice, but make sure that you get it flush with that pin, or that little sliver right there is what you'll get. And depending upon the width of your board, if you added an 1/8 inch to that, you would have an 1/8 inch pin right here on the side. This one, we're going to turn the blue tape away from the jig. And because I'm using a 1/4 inch straight bit, I'm going to use a 1/4 spacer. This right here is what I'm going to be using. You could also use a 1/4 drill bit. You could cut you a 1/4 strip on your table saw and just lay that with your jig, and that will work also. Or if you're using a 1/2 bit, use a 1/2 spacer, 1/2 drill bit, cut you a 1/2 strip of wood, whatever you got that is precisely a 1/2. And I don't know how well that worked out. I was probably in front of the camera more than what you were getting to see. But if you take a 1/4, if you're using a 1/4 bit, if you take a 1/4 bit and put it in here and make sure that you stay flush all the way up here, just set that over 1/4 inch from the edge of this black guide. That will make the exact amount of room for your next one to go through there. This is one I just cut. This is my first one that I cut with the tapes to the outside. And they will go together perfectly every time. They're just a little bit proud, which is fine. I'd rather have them too proud than not. You can always take a hand plane or even sand it and get rid of no more than what that is. That probably isn't even a 64th. Well, I hope there was a whole lot of takeaway in that for you. I know there was a lot of rambling in it about setting up and what guide to select and what template to use and so on and so forth. But I hope somewhere in that you found use. If you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up. If you haven't already, I invite you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I really would appreciate it. It helps the channel grow. And questions, comments, leave them down below. Links to my other dovetail videos on this jig in the description. And until next time, thanks for watching.